Hello everybody, my name is Lewis and I am the president of the Ryerson University Cycling Club, and given these very interesting times, especially in regards to cycling, I feel that it's pretty important to be able to keep up with the community and be able to give back some content to you guys that is meaningful for you. Clearly we're not able to have our in-person events, and you know what, that's totally fine as long as I'm able to stay agile and keep giving you guys something useful, like I just said. Alright, so without further ado, what today's video, stream, workshop, etc. will be, it's mainly going to be focused on tackling the challenge of preparing your bike, in my case this gray Norco, preparing your bike for the winter and being able to ride it, whether for casual reasons, for fitness, or whether you want to use it for doing errands and whatnot. Whatever you want to use your bike for, that's totally fine by me. In my case, I plan on using this bike to just get around, do some rides whenever I don't feel like using what I normally do, which is called bike share, and maybe run around, get some groceries and whatnot. What I will be doing to this bike is primarily I'm going to be installing mudguards. So I'm going to show you guys some tips and tricks for buying mudguards and how to actually install them, and probably make that as good reference for you. I'm also going to be focusing on installing a rack, which will allow you to carry stuff physically on the bike. I initially wanted to have everything set up. The way I set this bike up last year was I had mudguards and the rack. However, given that we have a little bit of time constraint with around an hour, I don't even want to take up the full hour. What I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be showing you the setup of the individual parts, and then probably in about a week or two release out a guide as to what I did to actually install everything on this bike, because especially on this model it's a little bit difficult. You'll see as we get into it later. Alright, so one last thing before I get started with this. In terms of actually being able to cycle in Toronto's actually pretty good in terms of winter clearance, maintenance, at least in the area that I live. I know I can't vouch for any other place that's not High Park or East End, but at least in my case it's pretty good. Another thing that you could consider, and maybe I'll allude to this in the end, is using the service called Bike Share. Bike Share allows you to not need a bike to be owned by you. Like, you don't have to store a bike like me right here behind me. You can actually undock a bike and very easily go to where you have to go, or maybe just take it out for a joyride, and the prices are very reasonable. So that's something to keep in mind in case you're not able to due to whatever personal circumstances you're not able to install all this stuff on your bike, or maybe you don't want to get your bike dirty, or whatever. That's up to you. That's cool. I use Bike Share as well. I already have my membership, so I have options. All right, perfect. One last thing I do want to mention is I will be taking lots of questions at the end. However, if you do want to ask any questions during when I'm like assembling stuff on the bike, maybe there's something unclear to you, feel free. I should get a notification from my streaming software to stop me and just answer your question and then get back to it. One thing, I am not a licensed bike mechanic, so in case of like probably very specific questions I may not be able to answer. However, I will be able to save all your questions and notify you, redirect them to somebody in our team who is more qualified than me. Alright, perfect. Any questions on the chat? No. Awesome. Alright. So, what I'm going to be focusing on now is I'm just going to show you the equipment that I'm going to use. And like I said, to start off I'm going to be focusing on installing the fenders. Then I'm going to focus on installing the rack. Alright, so I just went out of frame there. So what I'm holding in my hands here, this is a set of fenders called the SKS Beavertails. These are pretty good, not in terms of keeping you dry per se, but in terms of, well, for my uses, in terms of a mountain bike. As you can see right here, there's a lot of clearance between this tire and this bottom tube, and even in that rear tire as well, you have a lot of space here between here and the frame itself. And that actually, poses a few challenges as to what kind of stuff you can mount. So let's take this camera. So at the front here, we can see that we have a mounting bolt right here. Perfect. But we don't have any mounting equipment on the part below. And as you can see in this pink bike right here, we can see that, well, I hope you can see that clearly. You have those struts right there, these metal struts that go towards this part of the fork, and then you can see that we have an eyelet right here. Hopefully you can see that. Yes, you can see my finger. We don't have that on this bike. So the reason why I got these Beavertails was because these Beavertails, they only have this single mounting point, which means I can get a good amount of coverage with this fender. Let's put that down. I can get a good amount of coverage without having to, completely change the fork on my wheel, and I don't really want to do that. So let's put that down there. Now, for the rear, I did get a set of full coverage fenders, and the reason why I got these is because the sheer fact that this is full coverage will mean that most of the mud that gets on this wheel, so let me just get that on there. Most of the mud or any crud that can get on this wheel, as you can see, it will effectively be covered. And stuff that doesn't get on the frame eventually means that stuff doesn't get on you when you're on a long ride, or you want to keep your groceries dry, or maybe you're wearing a backpack and you don't want to get it dirty. So I consider this a pretty good setup. Now, I will consider that there are some, opposing opinions in regards to using full coverage fenders, and I'll cover those caveats later when I'm installing. And last but not least, this is the rack. So it actually works like this, and this is actually the rack that I have on that previous bike as well. This rack itself is Pfizer. It's actually specially made for disc brake bikes because it has these special, I'm going to call them clamps, but I'm probably going to say that wrong. It has these special clamp things, or whatever these things are, that allows you to install the fender like that or like that. So you can see that there's already extra space to be provided in case of a disc brake bike, and you'll see that further. Some of you, if you already have fenders, or if you are planning on getting fenders, racks, you might run into something like this. This is completely fine as well. All racks basically have the same set of mounting points that they use, and I'll talk about that later. So you may run into that one, or, well, I found this one lying around. This one is actually for a very specific bike that I have behind all these bikes. The fun thing about this one is that it has this clamp, so you can just, put something that you want to crush with this clamp. I don't know, maybe you can put your hand in there or something. So anyways, so one thing before I do start, I just want to discuss the required tools that you will need to install. So, in order to install this piece of hardware, you will need, first of all, let me show you what this is consisting of. There's this metal bracket that you're going to be installing on top of the fork, and it has these two hex bolts right here. So you're going to be tightening one hex bolt against the other. Obviously not with your hands, because that's already difficult. What I'm going to be using for this, I'm going to be using a ratchet wrench with I believe it's a 10-inch bit. You might not have this, and I didn't have this 6 months ago. So what I recommend is, if you have a set of wrenches, I would recommend you to use at least one adjustable wrench, like the one I have right here, and kickstand is optional. One or two adjustable wrenches. This wrench, I believe it's Mastercraft, so I got it from Canadian Tire. This wrench is about $20, and they're pretty handy to have around the house. Hopefully you have those. If not, at least just have you know, this kind of wrench and a 10 millimeter. All right, now in regards to installing the rear rack, what we will need are, I believe it's a 5 millimeter Allen key. Just this is the same bolt that we're going to be using for installing the rack. I hope you can see that. Maybe you can't see that, but that, trust me, that is an Allen key, Allen bolt. And in terms of installing the rear fender, you're also going to need an Allen key depending on the mounting equipment that's provided when you purchase one. You're also going to need, you could use the adjustable wrench to move these. These are hex bolts that I'll show you how they work later. Alright, finally discussed everything, let's get to the build. So, alluding back to when I was talking about the Beavertails, as you can tell, one of these is shorter than the other. Ideally, when you buy a full kit, you get this Beavertail for the front because, you know, you're going to be using this for wider coverage in the rear. But since I'm only using one of these, I use the long one. And that just guarantees that I'm able to get a lot of coverage from the bike itself. Let's just reposition that. So, first, what I always like to do before building, and I don't have my watch, but before you build, you know, this is for anybody, don't forget, make sure that you are as clean as possible. So if you like to wear a watch while you walk, like you walk around in your house or whatever, take it off, because eventually you might touch, you know, the gearing, for example, here, or you may touch some dirt, and you're going to get that on your person, and that's not going to be fun. Second, when you're assembling something, make sure to block out just, you know, maybe like an hour or two just to assemble that, just so you can do that. Because in the case you get your hands dirty, and inevitably I will, you may decide, oh, I'm gonna go watch a video on YouTube or something. You get up, you grab your phone, and you have grease on your hands, and now you have grease on your hands and your phone, and you have to wash that because that stuff is nasty. So just two major tips that I like to keep in mind. I know some people use latex gloves, but I don't have those for me, so that's not an option for me. But yes, you can remove the latex gloves and then go onto your brake and whatnot. Anyways, so those are just the two main precautions. So what I always like to do before I install any kit on my bike, I just like to visualize it, just because that gives me an idea as to what I can expect. So right now I'm just loosening this bolt. I think I can use my hands. Yep. Alright. So I kind of just... One last thing, whenever you're using small bits like these right here, try to have some area where you can keep those, because if you lose those little bits and they're the only ones that you have, that's not going to be fun to search for them. So I'm just going to keep those. I know I'm breaking my own rule, but I'm just going to keep those right here. Hopefully I don't lose them. Alright. So like I said, I want to visualize where I want to put this. So that looks pretty good. As you can tell right now, right off the bat, you can tell how far down this mudguard goes. And the farther down it goes from this horizontal line from your, this is called the dropout right here, where the wheel meets the fork. The horizontal line, if you go below that and you can cover that, that covers a lot of your spray away from you. And when I was using this bike for winter commuting last year, I can definitely attest that it was pretty good. Sorry, got a notification. Alright. Now, in regards to installing this, I'm going to install it with the just the bolt face facing out here. It doesn't really make a big difference in regards to your installation. I'm also going to use a washer just to prevent it from getting jammed after usage, of course. So basically the order that I'm putting it in, let me show you right here, is bolt from the left to right, of course. Bolt, then the washer, as you can see me pulling it out. On the other side, I'm putting the bracket directly against the fork, and then I'm going to put the washer against it, and then I'm going to put the locking nut. And I'm just going to hand tighten it as far as I can. Actually, I can get pretty far. Alright. Now, ooh, autofocus. This is annoying. I don't know why it's fixing. Sorry. Alright, you're seeing me blurry right now. Just facing a few technical difficulties. Let us... Alright, perfect. Sorry about that. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take the adjustable. I'm going to put it right here, and the adjustable will not move. I'm just going to be performing the adjusting motion from the outer side of the screw. So I got that there, and what I'm going to make sure, if you're using a ratchet, obviously make it, put it in the actuating setting. And now here we're going to have some ratcheting noise. So even though you can only see my back right now, I can assure you I am doing work. It's a pretty good workout, by the way. I'm going to hold off on that from now. So, in general, when you're installing mudguards, you want to install around the wheel, of course. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put that on there, just so that I can see where this is going, and you know, I don't tighten it somewhere else. Hey, Life of Fubar, can I get a shout out? You just got one right there, sir. Anything else? Shout out, Life of Fubar. Official shout out. So what you're seeing me right here, I'm gonna see if I can try to force this under here so that I can, well, I'm gonna try to wedge it so that I can get this positioning right here. Although it might not be a good idea. I think this is what I'm gonna do instead. By the way, whenever you're working on bike maintenance or whatnot, always good to think outside of the box, but always good to have a good YouTube tutorial in mind, especially if you're an amateur like me. So don't try wedging stuff up. So I'm just gonna, what I'm gonna do here, I'm going to tighten this bolt as far as possible. With the caveat that I'm not going to tighten it so far that I can't move the fender anymore. I'm just going to tighten it so that it allows me that wiggle room so that I can move the fender up to where I want it to be. And I'll show you why I want to move it up. I have that in a pretty decent location. So let me take the camera here. The reason why I want to move this up all the way to the top is because I want to provide as much space between this fender and this tire. We can already see that the fender fairly well covers the tire itself. However, you know, given winter riding and maybe riding on the road, you might have some debris that gets wedged or maybe caught in the actual wheel, and the last thing we want to do is have that object being stuck between this wheel and between the fender. Not good for the tire. So that's what I'm trying to ensure. Obviously, you're not going to get this on the first try, especially if you're doing it firsthand. It's just a matter of being patient. Of course, if you have a third or if you have a second pair of hands in the household, that also helps as well. Just get them to hold that up and then you can tighten it yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the last tightening on that. Perfect. And I can't seem to get my adjustable. There we go. Alright, perfect. So you know what? I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, the ride test will determine if it rides well. But if I were to lift this tire up right now and just, if I were to lift the wheel up and let it roll, I should at least only hear a little bit of contact between the fender and the tire. But otherwise, I think that looks pretty clean. Alright, let's move on to installing, no, I'm just kidding. I want to install the rack first because of reasons. Now the thing is, in terms of racks, you can clearly see that this is a flatbed. Some racks may not have such a flat bed and may have something like this. So depending on your usage, you could easily get away with just installing something like this, and that could block off a lot of road spray from you. However, it depends on the fender, it depends on the rack itself, obviously, and it's really is your mileage may vary, as they say. So before you install the rear rack, you just want to take a look at your bike for a few critical things, okay? And we're going to take a look at those right now. So first thing is, depending on the bike that you have, you might or might not have something called these brace-on eyelets. What this allows you to do is it allows you to mount the fender, the rack, as I'll show you right now. So there's a closer look. Basically, the rack requires two mounting points. It requires this mounting point right here, and ideally two parallel mounting points on that rear triangle, as you can see right there, pointed by my finger. And the reason why we want to do that, basically the anatomy of the rack is these eyelets themselves are going to be weight bearing, and these eyelets are just going to allow you to adjust the position of the rack. Alright, let's put that down there. So since I have this brake rack right here, what I want to do is I want to install these little legs right here, and I want to install them so that I have the maximum amount of space for my disc brakes, and we'll talk a little bit about disc brakes in a bit. I want to have a lot of clearance, so I'm going to put it as low as possible. And for now, since I'm not going to finalize this build, at least in this initial step, I'm just going to hand tighten if I can. It's not going to be holding weight, so that's not going to be a worry. So the reason why I say whenever you're, oh man, we're getting a call here. Hopefully you don't hear that. The reason I say you want to hand tighten your bolts first is because until you're finally finished installing all the bolts, you don't want to set yourself to a specific position because you're just going to be creating additional work for yourself. It's very easy right now because you're not actually installing anything on the rack, so you're not going to be bearing weight, so you actually don't have to hold anything down in terms of tightening bolts. Alright, so the general steps to installing a rack, and especially this one, I want to have this part out. The general steps to installing a rack is you install the bolts on the bottom of the frame first, and then you install the bolts here, and then you adjust. So I'm just going to leave that for visualization purposes. Don't be afraid if when you're installing your rack you have to open the rack, as in, you know, just move it out like so, like what I'm doing. Oops, okay. I made a slight mistake, but I think I can remediate it. So I'm just going to keep that for your viewership. Ta-da! We're not done, by the way. Alright. Usually, well, always, when you buy a rack, you will be getting mounting hardware with the rack. And I have a bag right here of some of that mounting hardware. I'm just gonna not very tidily throw it all out here. And what I'm looking for here, first of all, I'm looking for these two bolts right here. These are going to be used to mount onto the frame here. And depending on your situation, you might get identical bolts in length for installing up here. However, I have another bag right here. Can never have too many bags. Alright, perfect. So I'm going to use these two bolts that you can see here to install onto here. Generally these bolts will be weight bearing, however check your manufacturer's spec sheet in terms of how many pounds you can hold on to your rack. This rack can hold 25 pounds. Alright, so what I'm just going to do right now is I'm just going to see if I can hand tighten this without resorting to the Allen key. Alright, lucky. I can. And perfect. So that's one bolt down. I already have grease on my fingers. Okay, I'm going to show you the mistake I made, and I'm going to show you how I can remediate it. And also, if you get this kind of rack, you can remediate it too. So I'm just going to create some space for myself. Take this. There you go. You can see my hand very nicely. All right. So I'm showing you the rear area right now. I don't know if you can see it. Yes. I hope we can zoom in. All right. So you see how there's this space right here. I can almost fit my finger in between. So I made that mistake. So what I want to do is I just want to have this completely flush against the frame, depending on this situation, because I have short mounting hardware. Basically, I have this little bolt is too short to actually reach through here and then through here safely. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a quick detour and readjust that. If you're watching this live, just try to make sure that you're giving your frame, that you're not opening this too much as well. Oh, my bad. This holds 25 kilos, not 25 pounds. My bad. This is also a good lesson in not tightening your bolts too much, because now I have to completely remove this in order to be able to redo this bolt. So I'm out of frame, but I'm just undoing this mistake. Alright. Alright, perfect. So I'm going to show you right now, compared to what we had before, I actually created a little bit less space with that, so you can see it's a little bit asymmetrical, but that's perfect for my situation. So let's put this back. Feels like the fender has a mind of its own. I mean the rack. I keep mistaking rack and fender for some reason today. I don't know what's up with me. Alright, now I want to see if I can fit this little fella in here again. Might not get so lucky this time around. By the way, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Just like I said, block that 1 or 2 hours out so you don't get other stuff dirty with your dirty hands. And don't be afraid to make mistakes when you're installing stuff on your bike. It's really fun. You learn more. Alright, got that one in too. Perfect. I'm just going to use this Allen just to not forcibly keep that in there, because like I said, we're going to make the final tightenings once we're finished. Alright, not too tight. Alright, so as you can see right now, I can easily maneuver this up and down. So this is the next, probably the toughest part right here, is actually maintaining this board right here level. So there's a few ways that you can get it to be level. I know that this is not going to end up level because there's not enough distance here for me to actually make this level. Actually, without the... I think I can actually. Disregard that. So, one way that you can make sure it's level is by using your eyes, of course. You can hold the bike like so, and you can slightly tighten the bolts at the bottom right here, as you can see me. Slightly tighten them so you get that position. Don't tighten them too much. Slightly tighten. And that way you should be fine. That will allow you to maneuver this and get it into positioning, and then undo this, do the final check, and then you're good to go. Another way that you can do it is, of course, using a level, which will allow you to get it perfect. Don't worry about the horizontal sides of the actual rack to be level, because as you ride, you will be the person that keeps that side level. You just want to keep this, well, it's still horizontal. You still want to keep this direction from here, from my left hand to my right hand. You want to keep that level. All right. So I'm just gonna adjust this slightly. Perfect. Now I want to get those bolts that I referred to before. We're going to put these bolts down here. And just for reference, at the bottom here, I didn't use any washers at all. I just installed the bolt there. Depending on how much space you have, you might use washers to create space. Here, I'm just installing the bolt with one washer. the other bolt. Let's go ahead and install that too. One thing that does make life easier is if you have a kickstand, that makes it so much easier to install stuff on your bike. If you have a kickstand, feel free to put it up. Just make sure it can hold at least a little bit of your weight when you're pushing this on your bike. One thing I forgot to mention was when you're tightening both these bolts right here, you want to tighten them at the same rate. So if one bolt is loose, the other one has to be loose. That just makes it easier for you to get positioning down. Almost there. Alright, perfect. So I can now get that bolt in there. Tighten the other one. Not too much, of course. Just enough to be able to appreciate the positioning. And actually, I'm pretty happy with that. What do you think? It's not exactly level, it's a little bit lower here, but it's not bad at all. Alright, perfect. Alright, now I'm going to show you how to take off the rack and how to take off the fender. You may be wondering, why is this guy showing us how to take off the rack? Well, I have to show you how to get on the rear fender. So I'm just going to show you how to get off the rack first, then I'm going to put the rear fender on, and then I'm going to take both of them off if we have enough time. Yeah, we have good enough time. So, put that on there. So, like you just saw me do the installation, you're going to remove the rack in the reverse way that you installed it. Right hand roll, my bad. I was tightening instead of loosening. Whoa. My bike is not too happy right now. There we go. Bolt off. The other bolt off. This bad boy. Whoops. And this other, I can remove it by hand. I was going to say it's faster to remove it with the Allen key way than the hand way, and perfect timing. Anyways, so that might happen with your bike. Don't worry. Bikes like being hurt sometimes. Alright, so rack removed. Now the fender will take a little bit of time. So I just like to see if anybody in the stream has any questions at all right now before I move into the fender. Nope, perfect. Alright, so let's go through the anatomy of a fender first. A fender, a rear fender at least, a full coverage rear fender has, let's go with 3 mounting points. So we have the mounting point right here that you can see that eyelet. This eyelet is going to go in a hole, hopefully that your frame has it. I'll show you some alternatives if your frame doesn't have it. But should have a hole right here in the cranks. We have something called a brake bridge, which, again, if your bike frame has it, I've seen a few bike frames that don't, and I have a bike up here that doesn't have it. The brake bridge right here, let me show it to you actually. You can see that hole right there. So that's where we're going to mount that. And I guess the last set of mounting points would be on this part of the frame itself. So remember how I talked about this brace on right here? So that's, this brace on right here, that's going to be really important right here. Now, some of you guys may not have that hardware, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the options that you can have to work around that. So let's get some equipment. That was a lot of clanging. All right, so let me show you that bolt right here. You can see that right here, that it's being hidden by the chain. This bolt right here. Some bikes simply don't have that. If I were to show you my road bike, but my cable is probably not long enough. This road bike does not have that. So what you can do to remediate that is you can use zip ties. This, I believe it's a 100 pack zip ties. This 100 pack of zip ties, probably $10 at Canadian Tire. 2 zip ties are good for replacing that bolt. All you have to make sure of is that the zip tie goes through here and goes through this side right here, and then the other zip tie goes through here. So that's perfect. If you don't have a brake bridge, that's a little bit more difficult, because the brake bridge allows you to it's basically just, you know, like a third line of support from, you know, these entries and this entry. So if you are completely missing this, you can use zip ties as well. It's just like I said when I was installing the rack, you want to tighten one zip tie. You want to tighten the right zip tie first a little bit, then tighten the left zip tie a little bit. That's going to be really important in order to maintain the brake bridge to be in the center. So if I were to tighten the zip tie on the left, let's get that into frame. If I were to tighten this side more, then the brake bridge would move away from the bias. You can see that right there. So that's why you want to tighten them equally, so you get it around that central area. Of course, if your mudguard isn't directly over your tire, that spray is going to get on you. So you want to be careful about that. And one last thing. So my bike, I'm actually pretty lucky to have these bolts right here. However, some bikes just don't have this hardware, and that is a little bit difficult. There's a few actual workarounds for modern bikes in regards to installing that. And I have these examples right here. So what are these? These are, I believe, Axiom mud runners. I forget the actual name. And what they allow you to do, you can put this here against your quick release skewer, and that actually creates an entry point for fenders. I wouldn't use this for a rack, because these are clearly not weight bearing, so do not use them for a rack. But I can show you an example on this pink bike right here, where I hope you can see that. Maybe you can't. But what I've done is, we only had this single eyelet for this, and I didn't want to do crazy installation, so I used this Axiom entry point right here to install the fender. So there's lots of options, pretty much. That's what I'm trying to say. Whew. All right, let's get these zip ties out of the way. So I've saved the toughest for last. Installing the rear fender is a little bit difficult, because as I just showed you right now, we have to get to a actual entry point right here that is not easily accessible. What we have to do, we have to remove the rear wheel. So let me get this out of the way. So for any of us that have never lifted a bike before, because I'm gonna have to flip this bike, there's a few good tips that I can share with you. In terms of the specific model that I have right now, which is something that you call a flat bar bike because the handlebars are flat, what you want to do is you just want to grab the handlebars, do a little like a reel back towards you, and then just push away and then lift. And that should give you enough momentum to have the bike standing. And then what you can do is you can just, keeping the lower wheel continually moving away from you, you can just drop it down. So that's what I'm going to do right now. It might change a little bit depending on the bike that you have, because this bike isn't very long. The longer the bike, the more force you're going to have to do to actually get that to lift up. There's a good set of YouTube videos that you can refer to that I can share with you guys as well. Alright, let's get this flipped. By the way, we have evidence that my apartment is very small, but we're making do what we have. Alright, so they're reeling forward towards me, and then push, lift. We have this up, and now all I have to do, I'm using my knee on the seat to align it. I'm just going to put that on the seat. And if you're worried about your bike getting damaged, don't worry. The bike, compared to your weight as a rider, you probably weigh around at least 100 pounds. The bike itself, this bike at least, weighs only 20, and not all the weight is being put on the seat, so this does not damage the bike. Although if you're worried though, try to use a soft surface, like this mat that I'm using. One caveat of using the mat is if you do get grease on the mat, you have to clean the mat. So there's a give and take there. Alright, now one thing that we have to do, we have to remove the wheel. So let's talk wheel anatomy. What I have here, it looks like a quick release skewer. However, I actually am using something called a safety skewer. So what a safety skewer allows me to do is it replaces the quick release mechanism with something that is less tamper. It can't be tampered as easily by bike thieves. So what you do is, at least in my case, all I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this key, and I'm going to set this camera down. All I have to do is loosen that. So depending on the model of your wheel, just make sure to check out how to actually remove it from the frame. This is what happens when you do a two-hand job with one hand. But anyways, removing a wheel is a very basic cycling skill, so you should be able to pick it up pretty easily. Let's get that directed right there. But anyways, oh man, I am forgetting one big thing, and I'll show you how to remediate it if you get caught in this problem when you're removing the wheel. So when you remove the wheel, what you want to do is from the front chainring right here, so you can't see it, but from the front, basically where your legs are when you're pedaling, you want to be on the biggest chainring, so just the one that feels harder when you're pedaling. You also want to be on the smallest cog right here, so again, the one that feels harder when you're pedaling. Basically what this allows you to do is it allows you to get the wheel off very easily. However, if you're caught in the situation that I found myself in, where you have the bike upside down and you can't pedal, there's a very easy way of getting it around it. So first, tighten the wheel back up. Hopefully you have gears like mine, where I can easily adjust them from the front. But what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to pedal. And I'm just going to change the gear. Just be patient. I'm good with that. And then, perfect, lowest gear. So you can do that. That's a good workaround. Don't get caught in that situation though. Anyways, let's loosen that wheel up. Perfect. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to lift this derailleur up. So you see how that gives us space to move the wheel? And then you're going to pull the wheel out. It's very hard to move the camera over the bike. I just don't want to get my shirt dirty. Perfect. Wheel is off. Alright. Now, what you can do here is we're going to position the fender like so. And in case your brake bridge isn't already installed, the guidance towards your brake bridge is, in general, your brake bridge will look like this. Let's take it off. It will look like this. It's going to have one side that has the mounting hole and one side that just doesn't. So what you're going to do is you're going to put the side that has the mounting hole first and just slide it through. Don't worry about where it goes. The final position is determined by, you know, where you're actually going to mount this point. If you have a brake bridge or if you don't. So, you know, you can see it's very easy to slide this. Alright. Big mistake I did was wearing beige shorts while working on a bike. And basically what you want to do when you're putting the brake bridge on here, you want to make sure that the brake bridge is accessible for you to adjust it. You don't want to place it here where it's not easily adjustable. So we got that there. So I have a guess of how this is going to look on the bike. Perfect. Now what we want to do, we're going to get this bolt, and I'm looking for a lock nut. One sec. I have one from around here. Now I'm just looking at the time. I am getting close to an hour, so I'm gonna see if I can just cover this relatively quickly, but also not damage the quality of this. If necessary, I can hold another one of these for you guys, or I can also write up a guide with links to places that you can refer to. There's a lot of good content online, but you know, it's always good to see it live. It's always good to see the mistakes that are done when installing, especially from a noob like me. So anyways, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to install this Allen keyhole facing towards the tire, and then this lock nut's going to be behind. This is going to make it easier for me to adjust the actual positioning. So let's get this in here. Actually, I'm going to do this. Perfect. Your hands may get dirty. Don't worry. It's part of the process. Alright. I'm lucky my hand didn't get dirty there. And I'm just going to use this bolt for the brake bridge. But you can use anything that really fits in there. Again, hand tightening is usually the way to go, but if the bolts aren't, I guess, agreeing with you, feel free to use an Allen key. Just don't tighten too hard, because if you have to make an adjustment, you will have to untighten everything again. Alright, so I have that set up. Now what I want to do is I want to put the wheel back on, because we're going to have to flip this bike back up to how it was. This is my least favorite part of the process. The reason why we have to flip the bike back up is, like I alluded to earlier, we have to install the fender according to how our wheel is set up. Otherwise, we're just going to be wasting our time with trying to install it upside down. so get that wheel back on there, tighten it. So as you can see, ideally we could just adjust it there, but it's much easier when we're doing it the other way around. Alright, so we're running a little bit of time. I'm going to show you how to flip the bike back up in this way. I'm going to require more room, and then I'm going to cut it there. I'll record the rest of this and share it with you guys. Alright, so what I'm doing right here, I'm just having the pedals out of my way so it's in the down position when it's facing me. I'm going to move the video camera back so I have enough space. Perfect. And basically, you're gonna flip the bike holding the frame. Just hold it tight. There you go. So basically what I just did there, I just allowed the bike itself to adjust itself in space. It's much easier than any other alternative that I found. Alright, so what I would do next with you guys if we had more time. Alright, so I was just taking a little bit of time to stop the stream, but right now I'm just going to take probably the next 10 minutes to install this properly, show you additional tips and tricks, and yeah. One thing I will do is I'm going to go wash my hands. Alright, back. Clean hands make for much easier installs. So, basic anatomy of installing a rear mudguard is as follows. So as I was showing you guys before at the end of the stream, I was putting that a little bit wrong. I'm going to show you how it actually is supposed to look like. So, we have 4, I believe these are called fender stays. I may be incorrect. Basically what we want to do is, we see these entries right here, how they're a little bit riveted. Actually, you might not be able to see that. But basically there's 2 smooth sides. There's 1 smooth side and 1 riveted side. So when we install these, we want to have both riveted sides touching against each other. That just creates a nice amount of friction so that, as you ride through the town or whatever, any amount of rumbling on when you ride or whatnot won't actually loosen the bolt very easily. And how this is going to end up looking is you're going to have these at that brace-on point right there, and they're going to be connected to the fender. Now you can see that these are fairly straight. However, whenever you're installing these, don't be worried about bending them around your frame. As you can see right here, I have a disc brake, which definitely complicates being able to mount a straight piece of metal from here to here. I have to wrap that around because I have to be able to use this brake when I'm riding. Of course, the alternative would be to remove the brake, but then what's the point of having a brake then? That kind of thing. Of course, there are people that do have brakeless in the back. I don't recommend it because I have never used it. And if it's your first winter, I recommend having as many precautions as possible just in case anything happens. We're always learning, right? And rear brakes are fairly useful in a sense. Alright, so I'm going to be starting from this side just so you can see, and going back to the principle of not tightening too hard, I'm going to be swapping out the bit on my ratchet and using a smaller one because I believe this should fit this. Actually, I'm incorrect. No, it doesn't. Perfect. Okay. So, I'm gonna have this part out here. Feel free to bend these, by the way. Like, these are fairly bendable once you have them in position. quite cooperative. You can tighten this a little bit so that it cooperates better. Just get a good guideline of what you want to see. Make sure that your ratchet is in tightening mode. What am I doing? Right hand roll. Yes. Why is this so loose? Alright, good. That way it won't move that easily. Perfect. And now you can kind of see that, you know, by design, these will meet up right here, as you can see. Well, almost. Just this one keeps rotating. What I'm going to do, at least just to demonstrate, is what would happen if you were to fully mount this. So you want to have this bolt right here, and you can tighten with an Allen key if you'd like, or tighten with your hand. Of course, don't tighten too much because that will severely limit your ability to adjust. Oops. Alright, so that should be okay for now. So you can see I can still move this around depending on the final location that I want to have. Let's move on to the other side. And it's going to be a little bit harder for me to show you, but just bear with me. Alright, so, hello. Basically, I'm going to be following the same methodology. Of course, here I don't have a brake caliper to get in my way, so I believe it'll be much easier. Nice. Put this through. Beautiful. Alright, and what I'm going to do is the same thing that I did to show you guys. I'm going to take this bolt and I'm just going to feed it through these eyelets so that I have a nice positioning. And tighten as always. Sweet. So you may not be able to see this right now, but what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to adjust this so that the fender itself is over the wheel as much as possible. Since I have to bend these are going to look shorter, but obviously it's the same length. One thing that you have to do though, whenever you have to deal with a problem like this, is you have to overcompensate the side that has the most tension. Why is that? Because when you tighten that one side, it's going to pull this thing back. So right now what I'm dealing with is I'm dealing with a lot of bias of coverage. So basically what I'm trying to say with that is I'm dealing with this fender moving away from me, whereas I want it to be, you know, closer to here. So I want to put that bias against it, tighten this first, and then adjust. And you know, there's no perfect rule to this. You just have to, you know, try and feel the positioning. Like I said, don't over tighten too much because it makes it harder for you to move if you're not happy with the positioning. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tighten. That's a good sign. And that barely covers it pretty decently. And tighten the other one. Perfect. Tight. I'm actually pretty happy with this, with how this is turning out, not gonna lie. So you can see there's a good amount of clearance from here. Of course, we're still covering the tire. Let me just show you how it looks on the rear. Pretty covered. So this guys is how it looks like, pretty much. You can see that from the top down. You can't really see the tire, which is actually really good. Perfect. Alright, so pretty much after you've completed this step, what you can go ahead and do is tighten this bolt and the opposite bolt, and tighten the brake bridge bolt, and you have it right there. You should be good to go for a good set of winter riding. Anyways, guys, thank you so much again for making it out to the webinar. Thank you for watching this continuation video, and yeah, let me know any feedback, comments that you guys might have, and hope to see you out there riding.